So with over 25,000 miles on my Tesla Model 3, and for the fact that we're essentially quarantined, so I got a ton of time on my hands, I figured now would be a great time to give an in-depth review of what it's been like to live with the Tesla Model 3 for the past 8 months. Oh! So I wanted to interrupt the video real quick because I just finished filming it and I'm realizing that the video is entirely too long. Now I'm not necessarily going to shorten it dramatically, so I'm going to play a little game of choose your own adventure for those of you that might remember those books. Your first option is just bounce. You don't have the time to invest 15-20 minutes on a video. I get it. You're quarantined. You got better things to do. So maybe give me a thumbs up on your way out because I saved you the time of watching a video that you were going to think was entirely too long. Or you can choose from one of these fancy titles. They're all time-stamped. Pick one of them. If one of them's a topic you're interested in, go to that. Then you can dip. And again, thumbs up because I saved you some time. The third and final option is just let it roll. Let's see where it takes us. Maybe it'll get crazy. It probably won't, but I think it'll be informative. So whatever you choose, thanks for watching. Back to the video. The Model 3 has to be the most impactful car that Tesla has in its fleet to date. Prior to its release, you had the S and the X, and these are gorgeous cars. I would have loved to own one, but quite honestly, they cost more than my first house. But with the release of the Model 3, Tesla made their cars available to the masses. Really, for the same price as a fully loaded Toyota Camry, you could own a Tesla. Now, Tesla isn't the first company to come out with an electric car, and there's several more manufacturers coming out with them on the horizon. However, in my opinion, Tesla is the first company to fully answer and resolve the dreaded question of range anxiety. Now, I've been interested in Teslas for a long time, but they either cost way too much money and I just couldn't afford them, or with the release of the Model 3, I was concerned that it was just too small of a sedan for me to carry all the things I need for work. Additionally, I was one of those people that had this concern with range. How could somebody that drives 3,000 miles a month, covers 3 states, and is bouncing from place to place, how could I own an electric vehicle and not spend all of my time sitting at charging stations? So for anybody that's watched my channel before, you know I don't like to give a review until I've had ample time to use a product and can give you real-world feedback on what my experience has been. And now that we're approaching 26,000 miles, I figured this would be a great time to address everything that I've learned about the car, and there's a lot. And I'm going to break this into a couple categories. First, I'm going to start off with the battery. Then I'll get into charging and the different networks. Then we'll talk about all the fun stuff with the tech in the car. And then I'll get into my likes, my dislikes. There are dislikes. This isn't coming from a place of super fanboyism. And last but not least, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Model Y. So let's get into it. Now, the biggest question I get on a daily basis has to do with the battery and range. Everybody questions this range anxiety they might have by owning a fully electric car. How do you get through your day without living at charging stations and being stressed out because there's not charging stations on every corner like there are gas stations? And this is a thing. This is a real thing, and it was something that I struggled with initially. But I've learned a lot. But I also went into it without a lot of knowledge, and that's what I want to talk to you about. So I own the Model 3 all-wheel drive extended range Model 3. And this, when I bought it, was rated at 310 miles of range. My initial thought from buying this car was 310 miles of range. I can get in my car, drive one direction for 310 miles, and I'm good to go. Well, that's not right. That is so wrong. What I learned from this was the 310 miles is what Tesla rates the car at 100% of charge. Now, Tesla doesn't recommend you charge your car to 100% to prevent battery degradation. The recommendation is you charge your car somewhere between 80 and 90%. I charge my car at 90% on a daily basis, and every day I get in the car, I have about 270 miles of range. Now, that sounds like a big drop from 310, but again, I drive a lot. I drive about 3,000 miles a month, and I can tell you I've had almost zero issues with 270 miles of range. Now, I cover Maryland, DC, and Northern Virginia, so it's a very tight area, which it benefits me. I have two hospitals that I cover all the way on the East Coast and all the way on the West Coast. Those are the only two hospitals that give me a little bit of trouble, but otherwise, when I leave my house in the morning, I have enough range in my battery to get to all the hospitals I need to cover and home without stopping. Now, something I learned additionally to this range is the rating, let's say 310, just at 100% for argument's sake, that's dependent on the car driving in perfect conditions, keeping the speed between 45 and like 60, 65, driving on flat roads, not giving it a ton of, can you say gas, or giving it a ton of acceleration. If you drive in these perfect conditions, you'll get 310 miles. Well, in the real world, where real people drive cars, that never happens. So for me, most of the highways are 65 to 70, so I'm doing 75, 80 miles an hour, which is above that 65. That hurts the efficiency of the battery. Additionally, there's hills. Sometimes I'm going up into the mountains. Sometimes I'm right when the light turns green, I'm giving it acceleration. I'm quick off the line. So I don't drive in the optimal scenarios for this car to get the most out of the battery. So again, I leave in the morning at 270. I'm not getting 270 out of the car. I'm probably down around 240 miles. So now we went from 310 down to 240. Now there's a great app out there. It's called TezLab. I'm going to put it up here. And what you can see from this is when I go into the car, you can see the stats. So my car is 81% efficient based on the way I drive. So this app monitors your driving and it'll tell you how efficient you are on each trip. It'll give you an average. And this app is wonderful because you know what your car is doing based on how you drive. So I know I'm 81% efficient on average at the 270 miles. So I know generally what my range is going to be. So something else to keep in mind that I wasn't aware of is where you live has an impact on your car. So I live in Maryland. The winters get cold, typically in the 30s, and that hurts your total range. If you live anywhere outside of really the gorgeous weather in California, your car will be affected by cold. And that's because the car has to do things to keep the batteries warm and to keep the car kind of functioning. So the energy that it's using to keep these batteries warm, and cold batteries don't function the same way as warm batteries. So the cold does have an effect on your car. A good example is during the winter, if I charge my car to 100%, that should be at 310, it was like 295, maybe 299. So you lose range in cold weather areas. It's something to be aware of, something that I didn't know, and I don't want to say learn the hard way because it didn't affect me. I got through the winter fine, but it's something to be aware of. So now let's talk about charging, because this is an area where I made a crucial mistake and it almost caused me to return my Model 3 thinking it wouldn't work in my work-life balance. And I'll give you the backstory. So one of the doctors I work with was doing 100% of his charging at the hospital. Monday he would come in, charge his car, he would charge all week, and on Friday he would charge to 100%, which gave him enough energy to get through the weekend and back to the hospital on Monday. Now, I work at several hospitals and I figured, why should I pay for electric at the house when I can get it for free at work? So my thought going in was, I am not putting a charger in my garage. I'm not paying for that. I'm going to charge solely at the hospitals I work at. Well, I couldn't have been more wrong. And the reason is his scenario was very different from my scenario. So in his world, his round trip was about 40 miles, and he stayed at the hospital for 12, 14, 16, 18, 24 hours sometimes. He was at the hospital long enough that his car could get the charge that it needed because it sat there. Now, in my world, I go into the hospital for a much shorter time. Max, maybe I'm there for 6, 8 hours, which is a lot, but sometimes I'm there for 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. So the week I had my car, the first week I had my car, I felt like I was living in this range anxiety and I was constantly playing catch up. I would come out of the hospital, my car would be at 40%, and I'd had to see if I had enough juice to get to the next stop. And then when I got there, I would charge for a couple hours, but it wasn't enough charge to get me the juice I needed to then get to the next stop. So I'd stop at a supercharger. So it was this constant shuffling of where's the next stop I can make to get power. And it was so stressful that I immediately decided I had to put a home charger in my garage. And once I did that, it was life-changing. So what I found out very quickly when I started to research chargers in my house was there are 3 types of chargers. The first is a 110 outlet. That's the standard outlet you have all throughout your house that you plug your phone into, your lamps, everything. Now that charger will get you 3 miles an hour. Now if you're somebody that travels short distances, your car sits at home for extended amount of time, that might work for you. My mother uses that charger today and she lives in this 200-mile range. It works for her. Well, that was not going to work for me because I just drive too much. So I then went to the 220 options, which include the NEMA plug, which is the same plug that your dryer plugs into. That's a very economical way to go because the parts are relatively easy to get a hold of. The electricians have them, they can run them. It's easy and it's affordable. That charger gets you 30 miles of range an hour, so a big jump over the 110. Then your third option and most expensive is to use a Tesla specific charger. Now this unit itself costs $500, then you pay the electrician to run those same lines. It runs off 220 just like the other plug, but because it's Tesla specific, it's like 220 plus. So I found with this charger, I get 36 miles of range an hour, and I wanted to maximize my charge speeds at home, so that's the route I went, a little bit more expensive, but I love it. It's Tesla specific, so I just plug the cord right into my car and it's ready to go. I don't need adapters, I don't need anything special. That was the option I went with, and I love it. Now, if you're somebody like my doctor who can charge on the road and doesn't need to charge at home, that's a great option. If you go from one place to another every day and they have a charger there, take full advantage of that. The charging network is growing exponentially, and there's tons of third-party charging stations out there. You have EVgo, you have SEMA Connect, you have ChargePoint, you have all these third parties that work. The one thing I found about these third parties that made me a little bit leery about them is they're not all equal. There's really no standard. Sometimes I'd show up to a third-party charger and it was like the 110 outlet at my house. It was giving me 3, 4, 5, 6 miles of range an hour. It just wasn't enough. Then sometimes I'd show up and it was 440, which was giving me 400 miles of range. So it was very hit or miss. I will say there's an app out there that you can download that gives you information about these chargers, but it's kind of hit or miss. I like it, but sometimes it's not updated. So I've stayed away from third-party chargers unless they're right there and it's the option I have. I typically find myself going to Tesla-specific chargers, and that's because I know what I'm getting, and most of them are V2, or now you're starting to see V3 chargers. So at a Tesla supercharging station, a V2 charger will get you roughly 450 to 550 miles of range an hour. So if you think about it, my car only does 310, so in an hour it can do 450, 550. That's awesome. Now a V3 charger will get you 1,000 miles of range an hour. So that is what is going to be game changing with electric cars, is having these charging stations that can get you that much juice in a short amount of time. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you charge, And the best way to explain this is if I had a pitcher and a glass, and if I take the pitcher and I start to pour water in an empty glass, the first 80% of pouring that, I'm going to pour it fast. But that last 20%, you always start to back off so it doesn't overflow. The same thing happens with your car. When you charge, let's say you're at 20%, 20% to 80%, you're going to get that 450 miles of charge an hour. Once you get to 80%, that 450 decreases to 350 to 250 to 150. It starts to slow down. And that last 20% goes very, very slow. So it's something to know, because I think to maximize your time, pull into these charging stations, charge to 80%, then get on the road. 80% is great. It's a lot of range. It'll get you on your way. You don't need to go to 100%. That last 20% goes really slow. And those are some things I've learned on my end about charging. You really have to look at what your scenario is for owning an electric car. Where are you traveling? If you're bouncing from lots of different points and you travel long distances, you need a charger at home. If you are going to the same place every day, charge at work. That's great. But I will tell you, waking up in the morning and having a car with a full tank of gas, it's awesome. I have not stressed about gas. I don't stop at gas stations. It's phenomenal. I love it. So now let's jump into tech. And this is the thing that draws everybody into Tesla. It's what got me interested in the car and the company in general. And there's nothing like it. When you have somebody sit in the car and sees all the tech that's in this thing, it's just mind blowing. And it's probably the area I'm going to talk least about, because there's just so much content out there about all the tech. So I'm going to touch on some things regarding the tech, go into some details about some stuff, but some of it, there's just videos out there. Check them out. They're great. So first, I want to talk about the things that have changed in my car since I bought it. And one of those is being the battery. The battery, when I bought it, or the range, was 310 miles of range. That's gone up to 322 miles of range in the past 8 months. So my car gets better range 8 months later than it did when I bought it. The car is 5% faster than it was when I bought it, and that was free. That was a software upgrade, so that happened. The entertainment, now when I'm sitting in a charging station, I don't have to just check emails. I can check YouTube, I can check Netflix, Hulu. There's so much more entertainment in this car that's changed since I bought it. You have a security system called Sentry Mode, which I'm going to get more into, but that's gotten better than it was when I initially bought it. The braking system is better. The different AC modes is better. There's a scheduling feature. So this car gets better. And I think that's why Tesla owners get so geeked up about this car, is because they get these software updates, which changes the car overnight. You get in your car and it says, new software update. Would you like to download? You hit yes, and the car tells you all the things that it's better at. And that's what is just game changing. So let me touch on a couple of these things that really kind of grab me right off the bat. The first is going to be the brakes. This is the one thing that I think is so underrated that nobody talks about, or they don't talk about enough. This car has regenerative brakes. So if you're not familiar, rather than letting off the gas and hitting the brake, when you let off the gas, the motor starts to slow itself down. The energy that's generated from that slowing down gets put back into the battery. So you get more juice in the battery from the motor slowing down. So if you're going down a steep mountain and you just let off the gas, all that energy goes back into the battery. It's not a ton, but it's something. Now, what's changed about this since I bought it, originally when you let off the gas, it'd slow down to like 5 miles an hour and it would just coast. Well, through a software update, the car now comes to a complete stop. So just like any car you drive, you start to get used to, when I let off the gas, this is the distance I need before the car will stop. I do not use my brakes ever, unless a kid runs into the middle of the street, or a deer runs into the street, or there's a car slams on their brakes. I am never using my brakes. And I think this is something that's going to help Tesla in terms of maintenance, because you won't need to have brake jobs done or rotors changed or all these other things because you're not using your brakes ever. So that is something that I absolutely love about the car that I don't think gets enough attention. The other thing is full self-driving. I am not going to go into a ton of detail about full self-driving. There are tons and tons of videos on YouTube going over full self-driving. But there are a couple things with self-driving that I want to talk about. One, there's two types. There's standard autopilot and then there's enhanced autopilot. Standard autopilot is a glorified cruise control. The car paces the car in front of it with the caveat that the car will steer. So it'll take turns on the highway. If you want to change lanes, you throw the blinker on, it'll change lanes. So it is a standard autopilot or cruise control on steroids. It's great. Then you have enhanced autopilot, and this is what costs $7,000 and will drive you from on-ramp to off-ramp on a highway. This feature is when full self-driving comes out, point A to point B. If you have this, you will get it. So I purchased this and I like it. I use it a lot. I'll tell you where I use it the most. I don't use it in just busy traffic where traffic's moving, people are doing 70, but there's a lot of cars around you. I don't ever use full self-driving in that scenario. Where I typically use it is the two hospitals that are 200 miles from my house in either direction, and it's just open road. That's where I use it. I throw it on, leave my hand on the wheel to rest, and the car drives the entire distance. It's phenomenal. The other place I use it probably the most is in traffic. I live outside of DC. Most of the hospitals I work in are about 40 miles from my house, but it takes me about 3 hours to go 40 miles. So I sit in a lot of traffic, and this is where it is just a total blessing. I throw cruise control on or autopilot, and it just does all the work. Stop and go, stop and go. It does it all. So that's what I love full self-driving for, is the traffic and these long trips. Otherwise, I don't use it, and I'll tell you why in my dislike section. So last but not least, I know this has been a long video, but let me talk to you about the things I dislike about the car. I feel like a lot of the things I've just talked about are things I like. So there are a couple things that are just physical things about the car that really can't be changed. And one of those, and it's probably right now my biggest concern, and that's moisture in the taillight. I've started to see through this winter season that there's moisture in the rear taillights, and that really concerns me, maybe more than most, because I owned a Dodge Durango, and the Dodge Durango had that beautiful rear LED light, which was gorgeous. Well, after 3.5 years of owning it, part of that LED burnt out, and it ended up water had gotten into that rear taillight, and it started to affect the LED. It was a $3,000 repair, and it stunk. And now here we are 8 months into owning the Model 3, and I'm starting to see moisture in the taillight. So that concerns me a little bit. I'm hoping this is something Tesla's aware of. I'm hoping it's covered under warranty, but this might be something we see in the next 6 months to a year show up on threads and online, that people have bigger issues with this moisture getting into the taillight. So that's the first thing that really bothers me. Another is the paint. I've posted a video about that. The paint job on the Tesla is pretty crummy compared to other cars that I've owned. I drive a lot of miles, so I'm on the roads. I just see a lot of chips into my paint. My car is black, so maybe I'm more sensitive to it because the car is black, but I'm just not crazy about the paint job. I was going to wrap the car, but because I'm getting the Model Y, I don't want to wrap it getting the Model Y, so I've foregoed getting it wrapped, but I really wish the paint job was a little bit better. Then you have a frunk and a trunk that aren't automatic. Now there's third-party solutions to this, but I really wish the trunk or the frunk had some automatic features to it. I almost wish, and people might hate me for this, I almost wish the frunk was automatic versus the trunk, because the frunk is a little bit awkward to close. You kind of put your hands in a diamond right around the Tesla logo and press down and I find I have to press twice. I'm always worried I'm going to dent the hood. On top of that, again, my car is black, so now I have fingerprints all over it. I'm just not crazy about closing the frunk with my hands. And the trunk, I mean, it's 2020. The car drives itself. Couldn't I have an automatic liftgate somewhere on the car? So I wish that's something they would fix. I don't know. We're going to see that in the Model 3. It's supposed to be on the Model Y, so we'll see. With mentioning the frunk, and this is getting a little bit nitpicky, but the frunk space isn't great. And now a lot of people would say, I don't even have a frunk. So be happy you have something. Something's better than nothing, but it's just not usable space. I keep the Tesla charging bag in it and 2 really small folding chairs for my daughter's soccer games when we go to that. Other than that, I never use the thing. People talk about groceries. It's how few are you getting, like a case of soda and a loaf of bread? There's not enough room in this thing to stick any large amount of groceries in it, not at least not the type of shopping I do for a family of 4. So the frunk, it's just not usable space for me. Hopefully the Model Y will be larger, but we'll have to see when that comes out. And then everything else is software based. So there's a couple quirky things that happen to me with software. The good news is this mostly can be fixed through software updates. The first is messages. They recently released an update where your phone can, or the car can read your messages. So as text messages come in, it'll read them to you. The dictation in the car has gotten better, so you can reply. Every once in a while, I'll get into the car, my phone starts getting text messages. I realize the car hasn't notified me, and I go into settings and it's turned itself off. So for some reason, I'm getting these turn offs in the car. The second is the phone. So your phone is the key, one of the keys to the car. And the way it's supposed to work is as you walk to the car senses the Bluetooth from your phone and it unlocks. A lot of times I walk up to my car and I go to unlock it and it won't unlock. It has no kind of signs that I'm standing outside the car. As soon as I pull the phone out of my pocket and physically unlock it, now my car unlocks. So for some reason, my phone has to be unlocked to unlock the car. It's not a big inconvenience. The only time it stinks is, again, when you have hands full of groceries and you have to dig your phone out of your pocket. So that's a little thing, but hopefully that gets fixed. Sentry mode. Sentry mode is one of the things that needs the biggest kind of overhaul. So Sentry mode is the alarm system, and the way it works is somebody's around your car, it activates the cameras and it'll start to record what's going on around your car. This information gets stored on a hard drive or thumb drive that you install. When you get into your car, now it'll say you have 5 Sentry mode events. So you want to see what those events are. Well, in order to see those, you have to unplug your devices from your car, plug them into either your phone or a computer, and go through all this footage to view it. So it's very painful. Here you have a car with this large display. If it said an event, you could tap it and it would show you right there on the screen what's going on. That would be huge. I mean, that's really something that Tesla needs to address. Now, there's this third-party device called a Roadie, which is basically a small little computer that you plug in and it records all the footage, and it has an app so you can open your phone right there in the car without unplugging anything and see what happened. I've purchased that. I don't have it yet, so I'll let you know what that looks like. You can Google it, but that's a good solution for now. But Tesla really needs to get this built into the car. And then the last thing that drives me nuts, and it's also something that discourages me from using autopilot, is these phantom braking. So not a lot of times, there's times I'm driving on the highway and out of the blue, the car will slam on its brakes. I don't know if it's seeing a shadow in the road or it's getting glare from the sun, whatever's going on, it sees something that it thinks is an obstacle and it slams on its brakes. Now, I don't use this when the family's in the car, self-driving, because they flip out over it. They think we're about to wreck. But for me, my concern is if I'm on a highway, which I am regularly, and I'm doing 70 miles an hour, it's not bumper to bumper, but there's traffic, so there's somebody probably tailgating me or close behind me. If the car randomly slams on their brakes, I'm worried the person behind me is going to hit me. And not to defend them, but they're not expecting me to brake because they can see no obstacle in front of me. If they saw a car ahead of me slam on their brakes, they might know it's coming. But for my car to randomly brake, this is an issue, and it's something I hope gets addressed because it almost pushes me towards not using it unless it's wide open, which I talked about. Primarily if it's wide open or bumper to bumper traffic where that's not going to happen because everyone's going slow, that's where I use it. And maybe that's why those are the two areas I use it, just because I'm not confident the car and this phantom braking isn't going to be a thing. So that's the video. And I said I'd mention the Model Y. So I love the Model 3. It has been something that has gotten me into Tesla, has made me fall in love with the car. There's things, I don't want to be total fanboy here. There's things I would change about it and production things they need to fix, but the Model 3 has been the car to get me into this. I'm looking forward to the Model Y because the Model 3 is just a little too tight for what I'm used to. I'm used to larger SUVs for carrying all the medical devices that I need to carry. Surprisingly, I've made it work in the Model 3, but the Model Y I'm really looking forward to. I'm expecting delivery at some point soon, but I don't know when that's going to happen. And until then, I'm just kind of sitting back and waiting. But more and more stuff's coming out about it. There's leaks coming out. So super excited to get the Model Y. If you're on the fence, do it. If you want to buy the $35,000 Model 3, do it. You will not regret it. You can make the car work in any scenario. For somebody that drives a ton, I make it work. For somebody like my mother who drives very little, she makes it work. It's just a fun car. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this. I'm sorry it was super long, but get better, be better. I'll see you next time. See ya.